Yes, Mr. Chairman, we are live.
Not loud.
I hear echoes.
Okay, well, I'm getting feedback with yours. Okay, you just logged out. Darren, did you follow that? You can go ahead and start.
No, Mr. Chairman, I
We
didn't
can't hear you
catch-
either, Darren.
I got him.
Oh,
How
you
about
got him?
now?
Well, I can't hear him because I don't have my earphones in.
Mr.
Okay, I
Chairman,
can hear you now.
Can you hear me now? I can't hear you though.
I can't hear you.
I can't hear you now.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Mr. Chairman, I can hear Darren, but I could not hear you all. I could not hear Chairman Driscoll.
How about now?
Now I hear you.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could just, what would you like me to get started on? You want me to give a little recap or on the fees, or what would you like?
Yeah, I had a text that you were going to explain special revenues and how they work to us.
Okay.
I mentioned at lunchtime that we wanted to make sure everybody understood the difference between special revenues and general fund money, where your special revenues come from and how you use them one more time.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. Good to see you again after lunch. Just real briefly, our revenue streams on the park side come from three sources, really. The general fund, the special revenue from the fees. So all the fees that we generate in our state parks and historic sites, as well as the trails, both motorized and non-motorized, all come in as special revenue. And then we also have some special revenue with motorboat gas tax. So what we're trying to accomplish with this bill is to have the ability to decrease our general fund and augment it with the special revenue with the fees side of the house. So we're definitely trying not to grow government. We're trying to just continue to provide the services in which the people want and are desiring out in our system. As Senator Moniz kind of brought up during the last testimony, is this a good idea? It's scary to us to do that because of the fact that we're decreasing the amount of construction dollars. And so historically, when the fees were started and we had the ability to collect the fees and keep the fees, that gave us the opportunity to use all of that for capital construction. And then they added in major maintenance and interpretation down the road. When over the last decade, when we were going through all the budget reductions, our visitation was still going up. And so trying to decrease the amount of expenses we had, which we did, but we were strategic in how we did that. But we were able to utilize the special revenue through our fees to help offset some of those previous reductions. And that's where we're continuing to go down this path, going from, I think it started at 25%, went up to 30%. Now we're asking for up to 60% to have the ability to offset some of our general fund reductions and still maintain a high level of operations out in the field. And then The change in definition is to, when it was originally proposed and drafted, that up to 30% or not more than 30% could only be spent on maintenance. And to not everything we do in state parks is maintenance. We have other operational costs and duties that we do that we're looking to offset some of our general fund reductions with. So I hope that was a good enough wrap up on that, Mr. Chairman.
Works for me. Any questions from the committee? Okay.
Representative Haley had a question, Mr.
Well, I'm
Chairman.
sorry. Representative Haley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Darren, I got just a couple questions about revenue, I guess, generation is. And at the Territorial Prison Park in Laramie, there's that dump station for RVs. Is there a charge to use that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, it is a donation canister. Sometimes we have people out there directing traffic because there are so many people that are out there, but it is a donation. I think they asked for $10 because of the maintenance on that dump station, but as if you've driven by that parking lot, there's usually a pretty good line of RVs waiting to dump there. And so, but no, there isn't a direct charge on that dump station other than donation.
Have follow-up, Mr. Chairman? I
Yes,
assume
go
you
ahead.
said yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. So is there a way to make that permanent, and how much money do you think you could generate? And has anybody looked at like the compliance of people donating? I went by there the other day, there was 14 vehicles waiting to dump. And I thought, you know, it's got to cost the state parks money to use the city's sewer system.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Haley, obviously we have a water system that's connected to the city water system as well as the city sewer system. So there is a cost associated with the use of the water and the use of the sewer system. And so there is an opportunity to make it permanent. Right now, utilizing the donation system, we have not seen a significant issue with that in mind by making it permanent, but it is an amenity. Right now, we do this donation system throughout our whole state park system out in Evanston at Bear River. There is a donation canister out there as well. It's definitely providing a service to the traveling public and as well as in our users that use our state park system.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I have one more question, please.
Continue.
And that's on snowmobile registrations. Is there a differential in price between the resident and non-resident, like a resident, non-resident fishing license, for instance?
Mr. Chairman, I believe there is. Yes, sir. I'd have to double check. I should know that off the top of my head, but you have me kind of flat-footed on that one. But I got some people hopefully going to help me answer that question here in a second.
Okay, I didn't look the other day when I was at a place that sells them. The lady that works in there said there wasn't, and I didn't ask her to get if she had the books this time of year. I didn't ask her to get it out. I just took her at her word, but I wasn't sure that was actually the case. I thought there was a difference in price. So if you could, and the reason I'm asking about both of these is it's revenue generation that state parks could certainly use at this point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Darren.
Senator James.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the dump stations, does the cost of that get passed on to the residents of that area?
Mr. Chairman, Senator James, the cost to use it, I'm sorry, or the cost to build it?
For the maintenance and for the facilities to like the wastewater station and, you know, and the treatment plant and everything like that, does all that cost get passed on to the residents, or does it come out of the state parks budget?
Mr. Chairman and Senator, if I understand your question right, I think the fees that that we pay for the water and sewer go towards the operation of the water treatment plant, the sewer treatment plant. So it's a use just like your house or any of your business. Every gallon that you use, you pay a fee for that, and that goes towards the operation and maintenance of the water treatment, sewer treatment plants.
Yes.
And so those donations that you ask for would go toward to help you guys supplement that, correct?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, yes, that helps offset the water usage and the sewer usage fees that we put towards it. Also, it goes into a fund, a pot of money that inevitably, not all of our users are remember to pull the water hose away from their RV or their sewer hose away from their RV. And we've had errant water towers dragged behind RVs. And so it goes into a fund in which to help with some of the damage and maintenance on those individual units that we have throughout the state. We do have like some up at Glendo. It's a complete, it's not on the system, on a city system. It's on our own well system and our own lagoon system. So those go to directly help maintain our own infrastructure with maintaining a sewer lagoon or a well system and all the treatment that goes along with that.
Further questions from the committee? Okay, thank you, Darren. Okay, with that, I think if we can get Parks to send some people up, we'll go into the green sheet first that we've got.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, if I may, I can just kind of give some high level overview of what you have. And then if need be, Nick can assist as well, if that works for you.
That would be very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Mr. Chairman, co-chairman and committee, I do apologize for not getting this to you in advance. Really trying to ensure that we got kind of the intent of what Senator Driscoll or Chairman Driscoll wanted to make sure. Oh, and sorry, Mr. Chairman, I just got my answer for Representative Haley. Snowmobile permits are $35 for both resident and non-resident. So it is something to look into. So going back to the green sheet, Mr. Chairman, you asked us to kind of put together a list of information that we utilize internally, not to this detail, but we pulled together all the detail for you to look at. What you asked us to do, hopefully this gets to what you were asking, but I think, you know, as I said before, being part of a major part of the tourism industry, our mission is to make sure that we're impacting communities as well as enriching those lives. But we feel that we provide a significant lift, not only on the physical and mental health, but economically. You look at our visitation sitting 2.5 times our average this year. We know our economic impact is significant right now, and we're definitely part of the major tourism industry. Just quick overview of that sheet. And obviously what we did was we broke down each individual park and historic site on the sheet. On the far left-hand side, you see the categories in which we depicted the data. And then the next column over is the overall total. I'm just going to go down the overall total, just really on a summary basis. And then you guys, if you have any questions, we can go through individual park or site if you have any of those questions. But we have 19 main park and sites. We have 19 other satellite sites that those 19 oversee. I said a little earlier, 4.4 million visitors. Our annual revenue is a little over 3 million per year. Individual park site Operational budget is just shy of 5.4 million. Currently, that's broken out as shown: 2.7 million in general fund, 1.4 million in fees, and 1.2 million in motorboat gas tax. Out in the field, now this is just the field that I'm showing, just so we're clear. We have 49 and a half full-time employees. We have 111 and a half part-time employees. We do have a law enforcement program, all mostly based at water-based parks, but they do assist our historic sites as needed. The operations for the law enforcement is 532,000. This includes the full-time employee salaries as well as a small operational budget. And then we spend roughly $335,000 in seasonal employment. We do have 5 full-time law enforcement in our system, and we ramp up in the season with 26 other law enforcement officers. Most of our non-water-based parks and sites are managed through mutual aid agreements with the local police and sheriff departments. And likewise, we have mutual aid agreements at our water-based parks as well to assist the local police and sheriff offices as well. Just to give you an example of Glendo, it's on the sheet about midway through there. A normal weekend, Glendo will see anywhere from 20 to 25,000 people. This would make Glendo the 5th largest city in the state of Wyoming. It has over 10,000 acres. It's got 5 large water systems. It's got 4 sewer systems. It's got 40 structures that they maintain, 42 pit vault toilets, hundreds of miles of roads, 46 miles of trails, and you can go through the list a little bit more. And on average, Glendo has probably at any peak time, probably 4 law enforcement officers at any one time at Glendo. The entire system that we have out in the field is nearly 46,000 acres of land and 79,000 acres of water, almost 1,900 campsites. We have 11 cabins, 11 yurts, and 1 tree house. We have 45 public water systems out in the field, 48 sewer systems, total 211 pit vault toilets, 34 boat ramps, 5 fish cleaning stations, 155 miles of non-motorized trails. We maintain 361 just standard structures. And then we also maintain 146 historic structures. We oversee 8 major concessions. And when I say major concessions, we talked about 4 of them today. We have 3 marinas, 1 boat club. And so that kind of rounds up the major concessions. And then we have some minor concessions out there as well, and 51 private cabin leases and 22 other leases similar to like grazing and that kind of thing. Again, towards the bottom, I talked a little bit about the mission and the impact communities. As our latest economic impact study was back in 2009, 2010. And I think even with a 10-year-old economic impact study, we can still say that we're mission successful with over $78 million worth of direct visitor spending. And our impact to our payroll and our operations in those communities is 13 million. So we are currently in the process of working with the University of Wyoming to update that economic impact study. But I think you can all jump on my boat with this, that we can all be confident that not only with the increase in what we've done to improve our system over the last 10 years, but also with our visitation growth over the last 10 years, I think we can all agree that that economic impact is going to be significantly higher than the 2009, 2010. Hopefully, and I should have said this before, hopefully Nick brought some copies for you if you're there in Thermopolis and wanted a hard copy. Again, I apologize for the lateness, but I emailed them all out, and I know Mary Beth indicated that she put them up on the website as well. And so With that, Mr. Chairman, hopefully that was a decent high-level overview. And if you had any specific questions, I'd be more than happy to entertain them.
Thank you. Great data. It's generating questions for me, but I'm going to let everyone else go first. Anyone on the committee have questions? Okay, I guess I'll start a little. I kind of went through and highlighted some, and you know, your water parks come pretty close to making it. And I guess this afternoon, kind of what we're focusing on is ways that we can potentially look at ways to get you guys as close as we can to making these parks where they at least have the potential and what's feasible on it. And you know, it sticks out in Glendale. Glendale actually makes money for you, probably less law enforcement. It looks like it's a net win for you, and we vary across the board on the others. And then we get down to some of the others. And one of the ones I'd like for you to explain, because I'm not familiar down there at all, is Fort Bridgers. Looks like it's probably a couple $100,000 short of. Plus, it's got 3 full-time and 9 part-time. What's your visitation look like down there? And I guess on all these, we could kind of group a bunch of them together. But, you know, we got Fort Bridger and the historic Governor's Mansion and Trails End. Some of those to kind of give us an idea of what they take to go and how essential they are to your mission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, the one thing with historic sites, and I want to be really clear with this, is the visitation. Just for instance, at Fort Bridger, it's showing just shy of 100,000 a year, and the revenue, as you see there, is just shy of $38,000. Please keep in mind that all of these historic sites just get bombarded with school bus tours. And those go into the count in our visitation. And we, I think through some direction with the legislature and the governor's office have chosen to not charge school tours, but we do count them with, you know, in our total visitation count. So on a historic site, you're seeing probably significant difference there. The one thing I do want to make sure that on the operations, you're right, the operations budget does not, that is just direct operations. It is not full-time employees. It does have seasonal employees, but it does not have the count in there for full-time employees. So if you're looking at it from a dollar to dollar, we would have to add in the cost of the full-time employees. The seasonals, the seasonal part-time employees are listed there. Looking at it from, I guess, mission perspective, our historic sites, we're guided and directed to protect and preserve the history and heritage of our state. And so part of our mission and drive is to ensure that these are here for generations to come, to ensure that the history is there for people to live and feel. And so knowing that kind of business model, without the state doing it, I can guarantee you there's probably not a private entity out there that would be interested in taking on that lost leader. The beauty part of our system is that we have those Glendos of the world, you know, the keyholes of the world that help the revenue stream to ensure that not only do we get to help maintain the historic sites with some of their revenue streams that come in, but help do restoration work, again, to ensure that we're capitalizing on the heritage and the history that we have within our state of Wyoming.
Thank you. Hey, Senator James.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just curious on why the state parks and Office of Tourism haven't combined into one. It seems like the two departments could easily become one, and you guys could team up and accomplish a lot more. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, was the question, why don't we combine?
I believe it
Or
was.
was it, or was it a comment? I'm sorry, Mr. James or Senator.
I think it's why don't you? Correct.
I'm sorry, you was echoing.
The question, well, why don't you?
Oh,
Why?
well, our missions are quite different. We have the product, they market the products, right? So tourism has the ability to market everything in the state of Wyoming, to bring people from outside the borders to inside the borders, to help those local communities in the state of Wyoming to be successful with direct economic spending. We feel that we are the product in which she markets, and she markets a lot more than just us. She markets obviously the national parks as well as us, but there's all sorts of other products that she markets that not necessarily have anything to do with state parks or historic sites. So the combination of the two agencies, I don't know, other than the missions are quite different. I mean, our mission is to bring people through the state and stop at our facilities, and hopes that the bigger picture is that whatever we do here in Southeast Wyoming, if we can keep those people in this area long enough, you'll probably feel the impact on the southwest side of the state, and hopefully everybody on the southwest side of the state does the same for us on the southeast side of the state. And so, to coin a phrase that one of my deputies continues to use, is one more burger, one more burger, one more bed. So I think everybody in the tourism industry, whether you're in the tourism department or you have a marketable product, your goal should be to not be selfish and hope that you can keep all the dollars for you, but hope that everybody is marketing their product in which you can keep somebody within the state. And if everybody does their job, everybody's going to benefit because of the tourism industry. And so I'm not too sure that combination of the two agencies would benefit much.
Sorry, back up on technical. I didn't catch where we were at, Chairman Miller.
I think James had a question answered, but
Okay.
I have a question now.
Okay.
Director, I think I've asked this question before about South Pass and the tours and stuff at the old Carissa gold mine. Did we acquire the mineral rights to that property when we picked up that ground?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, I'm going to have to probably get back to you on that. I'm not 100% sure on the actual rights to that. I know we acquired some leases up there when we did the patent land transfer, but I'm not too sure if we controlled the mineral rights.
Very good. Follow up, Chairman Miller?
Yeah, follow up. I remember when some of that was going on, and we obviously shouldn't have picked it up without the mineral rights, because mineral rights have precedence over what goes on the surface. So I'm pretty sure we picked them up, but I've never seen that confirmed. Whether there were other leases disassociated from the patented claims, I don't know. But I'm just thinking of another way to generate revenue for that particular site. I could see that being leased out for something on the order of 50 to 100 grand a year for gold exploration. And if by chance they ever did actually find something, require them to move that existing mill site to a location that won't be impacted by the mine. If it costs them $5 million to do that, that means they're going to be producing, $500 million worth of material that we get to tax in Wyoming with severance and ad valorem taxes. So I just want that looked at if we do indeed own the mineral rights, and that's for benefit of people in this room too, and in this committee and other committees, to know that there are ways to generate revenue using our existing taxation system in Wyoming, but we don't seem to be that interested in it. Anyway, that's my editorial comment.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, well, I'll look into that and get back to you on whether or not we control the mineral rights on that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Westby, and for everybody in the audience. I don't know if we totally addressed what we're doing this afternoon. We're just looking overall state parks, education for the committee, ways to raise revenue, ways to get you off the general fund and get you closer to even. It's not done to strip anything down, to get rid of anything. It's mainly just get where we understand why it's there and how it operates and what the justifications are. Because I can assure you, as budget cuts come, this committee is your last line of defense to budget cuts when they come, depending on what we can do. So that being said, I've had some, and Director Westby, you know some of it. One of the ones that was brought up to me was our annual camping fees pass is apparently $100, which works out to 2 or 3 nights. And I need to know if it takes legislation to change that fee and where it's at. We know any fee changes you have, I've been through this before, you guys are going to get beat to a pulp. If we add $1 to the entrance fee, everybody goes crazy. But I think we're at that time, and I guess the process on annual camping, explain it to me, and how many nights does it take to camp away that pass, and maybe should we not be doing it in a little different manner? So I'll let you go from there, whoever.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just for some history, just if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman, we years ago, let's say back 3 years ago, now say 4 years ago, prior to 4 years ago, anytime we had a fee change, we had to come to the legislature. So if we wanted to increase our fees $1, it took legislative action, which was a monumental lift, not only for us, but for you, as well as for your constituents. And so what we did 3-4 years ago is we started working with this committee to try to be a little bit more nimble, a little bit more efficient with everybody's time and our ability to operate. And so what we did is we asked for the legislature to set a cap, a ceiling in which we can operate underneath. And so it's kind of started with efficiency, but then it also morphed into a little bit of dynamic pricing. It gave us the ability to start thinking more like a business on, all right, so on a busy weekend, we can charge more. In the off season, we can charge less to try to drive more visitation and entice. And so we haven't quite got to the full dynamic pricing on being able to increase our prices over the 4th of July weekend and decrease them on some of our known slow weekends. But we did start working into the off-season, on-season pricing, and it's really helped us try to market and get some shoulder season and winter season use, which has been a nice revenue generator for us. To go to your question, so I guess to back up a little bit more on the history of that, you all were successful with getting the cap set on each one of our fees that we charge. For instance, the annual resident pass, so what you can get and put in your car window to go into any state park or historic site, you put a cap at $64. Through rule, we, with the legislation, you stated that we had to go through the rulemaking process to set our fees to ensure that we were able to operate within them. And so right now we're setting our annual pass is $40. So we have $24 worth of ceiling still to get to on that. Our non-resident annual pass is $96 is the cap. We have it currently set at $70. Our resident daily use, so if you don't have the annual pass and you're just coming in for the day, The cap is set at 8. We charge 6 by rule. Our non-resident daily use fee capped at 12. Our current is at 9. Our resident overnight camping, if you just come in for one night and want to camp, the cap is at 12. We're currently at $9 to camp as a resident. Non-resident is capped at 18 a night. It's currently set at 16. And to go to your point, Mr. Chairman, on the annual resident overnight camping permit is $96 is the cap. Currently, we're sitting at 50. So to do just the math, you're at about 6 nights. If you come and camp 6 nights, you definitely have paid the amount for the annual camping. So there's definitely some elasticity in us to raise our fees to the point where we have the ability within our cap, obviously. And I think with our 5-year survey that we do with our market, we go out and we survey we try to survey everybody. Obviously, not everybody wants to give their survey, but we try to get a high percentage of our users to give us some data on, what would you be willing to pay to enjoy what we have to offer. And we do have some elasticity on data that shows that we can increase. But you are correct, Mr. Chairman. You raise it $1, we're going to get beat above the head and shoulders. But we do feel that it's going to be necessary for us with this time that we're in right now, and with our visitation continuing to climb, we have the ability, and I think from a business perspective, can justify increasing our rates. Now, I don't know if it's to that level. Mr. Chairman, I see Representative Freeman has his.
Yeah, I've got him when you get done.
Okay.
Representative Freeman.
Are you done, Darren?
Mr. Chairman, I can talk about fees all day long, so I'll entertain a question.
Well, the question that I have is I know you have the flexibility and you were supposed to do it on a marketing basis. I worked hard to get that to you. But what always kind of comes back is how competitive are you? How do your fees compare to Utah, Colorado, Nebraska, and that kind of stuff? Because that's going to have some sort of impact on how high you can bring that up. Have you done a comparison lately?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, we're constantly in a group of National State Park Association directors. And so Nick, who's sitting in the room with the committee today, is our representative there. And they're constantly working on, not necessarily collaborating on our fees by any means, but we have an information exchange that everybody knows what everybody's fees are. And we are still, we're starting to be competitive, but we're still pretty low in our region. It really depends. Not everybody charges fees like us. The one thing that we do have that not many states in the country have is a annual resident overnight camping permit. That's still something that the state of Wyoming enjoys, our citizens enjoy. However, if we're really looking at revenue, that would be one to eliminate, but we would probably really get beat up over that one. But the other thing, I guess, to go into real quickly is the fact that we do accept and manage land and water conservation funds. It's a federal program. It's offshore drilling taxes that come in. With us being a part of that and having received it, we cannot charge more than twice out-of-staters. We cannot charge out-of-staters more than twice what we charge in-staters. So we're always cognizant that we're not bumping out-of-staters up so high, because then we got to bring in-staters price up. However, if you look at our pricing that we have currently, we're not at twice out-of-staters. So we do have some flexibility there just right off the top. And so we're in the process right now. Nick and his team on the field support side of the house are working on what we feel, not only where we should go to help us with our you know, if this bill passes and our budget reduction gets approved by the governor and by you, the legislature, then we're going to need to probably raise our fees to ensure that we have the ability to offset those charges and still try to keep up with maintenance and capital construction that our visitors enjoy.
Very good. LWCF, how many dollars do we get out of the Land and Water Conservation Fund a year?
We meaning the state is right around, over the last probably 5-6 years has been right around $1 million. I think this upcoming year, the federal government has authorized permanent funding of that, of those funds. And I think also increase the amount that is going to come stateside. And so that amount is increasing to, I want to say, a couple $1 million coming to the state of Wyoming. So we'll have more money to distribute to the state of Wyoming and the recreation facilities.
Okay, and then I'm going to wander around on you. I made a list up. On your annual camping fees on your registration type campgrounds, once these guys have bought one, they can get online and register as many nights a year as they want on these campsites.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
And do we keep track of how many of them sit empty when they do it? Because I can see if I had an annual pass, a keyhole that I'm going to get on the first day of the year and take every Saturday and Sunday at whatever point for the entire deal, just because I know I already have them and it doesn't cost me any more than doing it. Do we monitor any of that?
Mr. Chairman, it's part, I should probably ask Nick to get up and talk about this because he's the one that gets 98% of the complaints and calls in on the reservation system. But you're absolutely right. That is something that we're probably working with the reservation company on a regular basis, as well as local field staff, on how to ensure compliance of people that show and don't show. Those that don't show, we're keeping a list and calling them and asking why they're not here. And if they're not here, they get put on, you know, what, not a blackball list, but it's definitely a watch list. And if they continue to not show up, like you're mentioning, we do have the ability to pull their authority to make a reservation on the system. Call it a bad person, you know, a bad reservation list, whatever you want to call it. But we do have that issue. And I witnessed it firsthand at Glendo over the 4th of July. I drove down through some campsites or campgrounds, and there was some empty campsites, and we're marketing that we're 100% full. And so I don't think that that's it's not good brand management on our part. And so again, we're for the lack of better way of explaining it, we're short-staffed. We don't have the amount of people that it takes to fully monitor. Say at Glendo, you got 550 campsites up there at Glendo. To get a couple of people to go through there on a daily basis to ensure compliance of the reservation. Not only are you in the right spot, but did you show up? Who's showing up tomorrow? Who's showing up when? We need more people to do that. And I know the crew that's out there right now is working hard just to try to keep the restrooms clean and try to stay out in front of the trash and try to make sure the boat docks are in place and not getting blown into one side or the other. And so I'm not trying to sing a swan song or any kind of a small, you know, violin, but it's definitely something that our team takes a lot of pride in making sure that the maintenance is up to keep. We just probably need a few more people to just do nothing but ensure that our reservation system is being complied with.
Yeah, I can feel for you on that. Do you do campground hosts that stay for free that help manage your campgrounds?
Mr. Chairman, thanks for that. We do have campground host program, volunteer program, and most of our parks and sites utilize them, and they're a great resource. And we do have people that, as you can imagine, they love coming to Wyoming State Parks and staying in a state park campground all summer long and helping us out a couple days or a couple hours a day, whether they're mowing or monitoring the campsites for compliance. But we have, like I said, 1,900 campsites out there, probably, 500 campgrounds. There's definitely not enough camp hosts to fill each campground, but I know our program is becoming robust. It's not nearly where we'd like it to be, and hopefully at some point we'll be able to get there, and that would definitely help from a volunteer perspective offset some of those timeframes.
How bad would the kickback be if we eliminated the annual resident passes? And the monthly resident? How many a year do you sell? I guess I'll put it that way.
Let me just see if I can
We've
get
got
that.
time.
Really.
You don't have to answer it right now. I see Nick digging too. So
I think that there's probably 4,000 to 5,000 of those sold every year.
significant amount of money then.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, sorry.
And have you considered boat launch fees at your boat ramps?
You know, Mr. Chairman, we haven't gone down boat ramp launch fees from a I guess, and I'll let Nick kind of probably if he has the appropriate answer for this, but we haven't gone down that route because we feel that when you enter the park and you're recreating, hopefully your fee will cover it. And I think that goes back to some of your cost or your comments about we're just probably not charging enough to ensure that we're being able to fully ensure that we're being able to capture every revenue. We also don't want to be there at every turn with our hand out saying, all right, now you got through the park. Thanks for that fee. You go up to the boat ramp. Now you have your hand out again, and then there's a compliance. And then we have people that have to maintain and sit there and collect those fees. That's why we do the donation canisters out there at like the fee or the dump station. Hopefully people understand and appreciate what we have and what we offer, and that they are compliant with the donation. Not that there is no required fee, it's just a good donation, but we haven't gone down the boat ramp fee. And Mr. Chairman, just really quickly to go back to Mr. Co-Chair's answer, it does appear that we do have full mineral rights up there.
Very good, thank you. I guess where I'm at on boat ramp fee, there's wear and tear on roads, enforcement, everything else. There's a big difference between a car full of husband and wife and 5 kids out there running around and swimming on the edge of the bank and maybe throwing a fishing pole in, and a guy coming in with a pickup and a boat trailer and a spot that we pave parking lot for his boat trailer, launches boats, which if I remember right, since I've been in, we've done 2 or 3 of those boat ramps at about 700,000 to $1 million a whack. I'm sorry if I sound like I'm kind of discriminatory towards people with boats, but I am. I'm a boat owner, and I think when I go snowmobiling, I'm used to paying quite a lot of money. It's expensive to play. And when we had a lot of income, and that's part of why we're approaching this meeting, when we had a lot of income, it was fine to use some oil or coal money to subsidize that end of it. But I think the drumbeat's going to get louder and louder that these recreation facilities at least make a reasonable attempt to make themselves self-supporting. And so I'm nibbling around the edges on you on one. How do we either eliminate services or ramp them down a little in places that we can? And second, how do we do, which I'm probably going to be attacked tomorrow on social media about it, how do we raise these user fees to get them where you guys can hire the people that you need and run your facilities adequately.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate all those comments, and it's definitely the fine line that we walk on a regular basis. And I know when Nick and his team, as well as Dave, who's not, he's on listening, but he's not there. But when they get together with their crew to decide where they're going to raise the fees, we'll definitely keep all this conversation in mind to ensure that we get them to a point where we feel is comfortable, but also from a political standpoint, ensure that we can have justification and support with data to do so. And you're right, at some point, hopefully this bill that we were talking about earlier gets pushed through, and it gives us a little bit more flexibility on being able to utilize these funds a little bit more than just on maintenance. And maybe we can hire some more seasonals for the fee program so they can go out and ensure the campground compliance is happening. Maybe we can find more volunteers to do that, but I can't rely or guarantee on volunteers. That's coming from Cheyenne Frontier Days, where we have 2,500 to 3,000 of them. They're the best working, hardest working individuals, but we also know that I have a hard time asking volunteers to do some things that I'm going to have to pay some people to do. And so there's always that line that we have to walk as well to ensure that our safety and satisfaction of our customers are met.
Very good. Automated entrance booths, have you looked at them at all? I can go to Walmart now and shove a $20 bill or even a check into a reader and have it work and not have a person there. Have you looked into those and the possibility of them? Because I do go to the state parks, and it's quite a few people that don't register. They manage to get in one way or the other and are not there.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I know we have, but I think Nick would be probably best to answer on this topic. He's been deeply involved, like I said, with the National Association of Park Directors to ensure that we're trying to keep up with the national technology. And I'll let Nick go ahead and dive in if that's okay, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, you've looked at kiosks.
A lot of states use a lot of different states use kiosks, and we did an extensive study comparing what different companies do. We had some companies come out and give us demos. We experimented with kiosks at different state park systems around the country as we traveled individually. And we had some money in our budget, using our special revenue to actually purchase and install some kiosks. And then at some point, the same companies came to us and said that perhaps mobile technology using your smartphone would be better and cheaper. And so we kind of put the brakes on buying the kiosks and wanted to look at the mobile technology. Then this last fall, we got a presentation from a vendor who's our reservation system vendor. And they said that you can combine the two. And so they would be willing to essentially give us the kiosks instead of us spending $300,000 on kiosks. They give them to us for a period of years. We'd have to commit to them for a certain period of years, and then they would work in hand with the mobile technology. So we were getting ready to explore that when the virus hit and everything kind of changed focus.
Perfect. Committee, any follow-up from anybody? Otherwise, I'll keep going for a little bit. Now I'm going to go down Law Enforcement Road for a short path. I was here when we started law enforcement in the parks. Representative Task.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question back on our concessionaires here in town. Do they pay city and county taxes on their buildings and property that they have on the state, on the parklands?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that they do.
If the state takes that over, those taxes will go away, will they not?
I don't, Mr. Chairman, I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, the state doesn't pay itself taxes.
Well, they may be, Mr. Chairman, they may be absorbed through the vendor, through the management agreement.
Thank you.
Further questions, committee? Okay, on law enforcement, back to, I was here 11 years ago under Millward when they brought them, and it was interesting because we were told there'd be 2 or 3 and not many more, and we delved into the retirement costs, the cost of law enforcement versus, and I see us now 11 years later, we're up to 5 full-time rangers, 28 seasonal rangers, 6 park superintendents, 2 district managers. The budget's up to $800,000. I'm having a pretty hard time, and I've had some visits with Director Westby about it, but the honest justification and how many calls a year do they get that really honestly require a certified law enforcement officer? And could we be handling this in a more efficient, cheaper way? Because it's, I can tell you from my end, and I guess are the seasonal ones drawing law enforcement benefit packages and retirement towards their employment with the state and whatnot? And I'll leave it there and follow some others.
Mr. Chairman, no, they don't.
Okay. Senator James, you have a question?
Well, my question on that too would be, what would be the jurisdiction of Game and Fish, and what could local law enforcement handle? I mean, why wouldn't it be state parks law enforcement?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, I'm not sure I understand your question. Are you asking why other agencies don't do this for us? Mr. Chairman, Senator, I think that what you find is that a lot of other law enforcement agencies around the state are also strapped for personnel and for their ability to cover the area that they already have. I know that in some counties, for example, when we have our full permanent and seasonal staff on, we have more law enforcement working than the sheriff's department in that county. And so it's equally often that we're asked to help out at the county level as it is for them to come and help us.
Mr. Chairman, this is
Senator
Darren.
James, follow up.
I just like to add a little bit more, and I kind
No,
of.
Darren, I'm sorry. I got my audio because what we're doing.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chairman. I just like to add a little bit to that. And I kind of touched on it in my overview of this, but most weekends we dwarf the county, and not only in local population, but like take Glendale, for instance, Platte County. We have 20 to 25,000 people just at Glendale State Park, and that dwarfs the amount of, the ability of the local sheriff that's there in that area, as well as I believe they have 1 law enforcement in the town of Glendale. And so as Nick said, I can't say it often, but we do get called out on a regular basis to assist with mutual aid requests out there. And so, a lot of times we are first on the scene to help local law enforcement be assistant to the citizens and visitors of the state.
I'll follow the Lynette. Tom, you did exactly represent. I guess my deal, 1, Game and Fish are law enforcement, I believe, at these parks. And I get Glendale. I fully understand that you're in a county and you've got more people than there are in the county. But for these other parks, 1, in tough budget times, I question whether you ought to be, I get joint agreements, you go back and forth, but if you're responding to lots of calls outside of the park, they probably need to be adding law enforcement within their county. Second is, you got statistics on how many threat type deals you have other than, I know I can tell you I get 50 calls a year. you guys write a couple hundred speeding tickets a year at Keyhole. It generates an unbelievable amount of bad publicity for you folks. And I guess it's one thing if they're going 80 going in there, but tickets that are 5 miles over, and those guys ride them steady. I question if that's a great use of guys. I really do. And how bad we need people that are fully law enforcement trained. What situations arrive that are there. I know we lost the life of a ranger at Glendale a number of years back, or I believe it was Glendale. But I really do question whether we need full-time law enforcement at lots of these parks. And I'm more than open for comments and justifications.
Mr. Chairman, I'll pipe in, and then if I don't address something, I'll let Nick back clean up on this. But our law enforcement sees everything that a local police officer would see on a regular basis. The gentleman sitting behind Nick right now is a law enforcement. He's a district manager, but he also has his post certification. So he too could probably speak to what these individuals see on a regular basis. And I get your comment about what happens up at Keyhole, and we have been addressing that. I know for the last little while, we've been really trying to get to an education perspective versus a heavy-handed compliant, issuing citation. Let's educate rather than citate. But we still have, how many warnings does it take before you have to issue a citation? And I know I've been working with Representative Lindholm on a lot of those complaints that probably you were getting as well, Mr. Chairman. And a lot of them, after you dig through a lot of what was happening, at least in that area, and I'm going to defend my law enforcement up there a little bit. Yes, there was some heavy-handed there for a while, but we really worked on them, and I think we're a lot better in how we handle this. But ultimately, it comes down to, we have cameras on all of our law enforcement. So what was being said but what was reality were two different things. And so as much as the body cameras are to help the consumer or the citizen, it also is a corroborating factor for my law enforcement when they're getting accused of doing something inappropriate or wrong, when I have the tape that proves otherwise. And so then you go back through a lot of the other stuff is how many warnings. What you may not hear is how many warnings did an individual get to slow down before a ticket was actually issued, or hey, put out the fire, there's a fire restriction, and then come back 2 hours later and there's a bigger fire, and then, State Park kind of lends itself to a good party atmosphere that, albeit we want people to have a good time when they come, but not always does it stay at a level of fun. It can escalate pretty quickly. And when we're trying to invite a bunch of families out and there's a big rowdy party next door, and you call the local sheriff and they're 2 hours out, that's not very responsive to our consumers to ensure that we're getting some compliance to a level of product in which people are expecting to have. But I know that's probably not exactly where you were going with that question, Mr. Chairman, and I hope maybe Nick can help me out if I missed something or should added something.
Mr. Chairman, our 5 permanent rangers and 25 seasonals had over 20,000 contacts last year with our visitors, and 65% of those were non-law enforcement contacts. So our rangers are focused on being rangers first and law enforcement second. We want to be able to help our visitors, help our guests, but they have the law enforcement ability if they need it. There was one weekend earlier this year where there was a domestic violence incident at a park that resulted in a stabbing. There was a fist fight between 2 customers that resulted in one of them going to the hospital, both at the same park on the same weekend. One of our law enforcement officers was recently run over by an irate customer. These folks really put their lives and safety out there to protect our other visitors, and I think that they do perform, a very valuable and important service. These, as Director Wispy said, the parks lend themselves to a party atmosphere. You're out in the middle of nowhere. There's no other law enforcement but us. And if we're not there to take care of that, things could get ugly quickly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question on this chart, and it has the permanent staff, full-time, part-time, 49 and a half, and then the law enforcement staff. The law enforcement staff is not in this 49 and a half number. That's a separate number.
I believe so. I guess Director Westby for clarification on that.
I believe it is, Mr. Chairman, I believe that is a separate number.
Thank you. Follow up.
Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the people listed as law enforcement also have other duties, not just law enforcement duties?
Mr. Chairman, represented the district managers and the superintendents that are listed as law enforcement also are superintendent and district manager at those particular sites or districts. They, in most cases, were law enforcement rangers at some point, and as they promoted up, they kept their credentials and remained law enforcement.
I guess a question for me, pay difference between a ranger and a law enforcement. They pay and retire at the end of it. What they retire earlier, their benefits. What's your cost difference between a park ranger and a law enforcement ranger?
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question, but we can get you that information.
Because I guess from my end, I run a park as well, and I get it. We have no law enforcement. Our sheriff's office understands very well that when we got serious problems, they prioritize and get there. And my guests all also know that if they're doing a party or a fire that is outside of either our county law or our campground rules, that I'm going to come ask you to leave, and I'm going to ask you once. And then I do exactly what I think you guys should be doing, is I call the sheriff's office and they come out with deputies and they help them leave. And I think as we get into these budget times, I question whether this makes a lot of sense long-term. And I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's easy, but if they cost significantly more, would we not be further ahead to have more people out there going about it? I also think at times law enforcement escalates on the initial level more than the normal ranger does. When you walk up as an individual, they tend to be a little less likely to instantly be that silly if they're drunk or whatever. And but anyway, I've talked with both you and Director Westby, and we're going to be made appropriations, or someone's going to be tasked with unbelievable hard jobs. And either we figure them out internally with you folks, that's part of what this exercise is, or a group of 7 guys in a room is going to sit down, or 12 guys, and do it for you. And I'd way rather that we had some control. And that's really what this afternoon meeting's about, is what's the low-hanging fruit that we can pick off easily. And on part of it, I'm willing. I'm sitting on YouTube. I'll take the hit. I'll look my local guys in the eye and say, look, the coal fees can't pay for you guys to launch boats anymore, or they can't pay to subsidize campgrounds. And I really do believe we need to get in an area that we get this as close as we can to working right. Mr. Chairman.
The retirement for our law enforcement is the same as retirement for our non-law enforcement. They're not part of the other law enforcement retirement service.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could add.
Any further questions? I guess one last from me is, do you rank some way? And I'm gonna create Senator Kinski's gonna come after me. Senator Kendrick's mansion in Sheridan Trails End, a handful of these are phenomenally expensive. And I question whether we could move them out of your system into another deal, still maintain protection. And I'm even that way with the historic governor's mansion in Cheyenne. It's a wonderful place and I want to protect it forever. But could we possibly maintain it cheaper with a local group and have you guys focus much closer on where your dollars go? Thoughts? Because like I said, as I go through this list, Bear River is another one. That I can bring up because it's a long ways from my home. I question why it's a state park and why it's not a deal. And I've also heard even in Thermopolis here is why is the city probably involved somewhat, because it is a good part of Thermopolis almost as a city park in truth. So some comments.
And both are gonna get out of town.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I guess I would hope that at least in this time frame, myself and my management team, as well as the crew out in the field, as well as on the cultural resource side, have worked over the last several months to develop our budget reductions and have submitted them to the governor. And I don't want to get out in front of the governor either, but he's in the process of reviewing our reductions and will put forward his recommendations at that time. As things progress, Mr. Chairman, I too am concerned about things, but analysis is like this is what our team does on a regular basis. And we have talked several times about several of the parks and sites that we have that we scratch our heads on. However, a lot of these are, I guess I just need to bring some reality back. One thing I can almost guarantee you, and I haven't been here more than 20 years, but all the historic sites that we have brought onto the system, or state parks that we brought onto the system, we haven't come looking for them. They've been dumped in our lap. And so we actually came and was fortunate enough to develop a site criteria process because we were the dumping grounds of everybody that had something that they wanted to preserve. And so we finally got some legislation put together to ensure that we just weren't given unfunded mandates to make sure that we kept properties in perpetuity and not have any funds to do it properly. And so we are continuously looking. Yes, you hit one on Hot Springs. We've talked about Hot Springs State Park being a city park. We've talked about Bear River being a city or a county park. We talked about EKW being a county park. You know, there's a lot of those that we have out there in the system that would lend itself to being absorbed into the local community. However, we have to look deep into the how and the why it became a state facility to ensure that we're not stepping on the toes of prior legislators that did it for a reason. And I just, not caution, I just want you to know that's the thought process that we go through on a regular basis to ensure that we're not stepping on toes. So.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. I'm guilty. I was one of the ringleaders on the LX bar, which is about as bad an unfunded mandate as you have. So I thoroughly understand what you're talking about, where they came from and how they went. But you know, we're in a different time now. This is a new era, and it's going to have to do. Probably my last one on these before we get there. Atlas site in Cheyenne. Can you update us a little what visitation is, and are we going to need some more money to get there? And you know, is it showing some trends that it's going to get where we want to be at?
Mr. Chairman, I'll try to jump in and then I'll let Nick help me out. Quebec 1 missile alert facility just north, about 29 miles north of Cheyenne. Unfortunately, we opened at the wrong time. We opened late last fall and then COVID happened. So We were a little bit concerned with the revenue generation because it was supposed to be self-supporting. And so in our budget proposal, we did ask for gap funding to get us through, to limp along until we can generate enough revenue to operate that facility. So I don't think the visitation has been where we wanted it to, but there's probably many reasons why. And I think everybody's feeling that same reason.
Senator James, have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First question is, when was this spreadsheet made? When was this last updated?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, the team finalized it yesterday, I believe.
Yesterday, okay. And then, so I'm sure everyone's aware that I like to do public records requests. So on my last public records request that I did the executive branch, and part of it is included the state parks and cultural resources. And I count 6 park district managers, but you guys are only showing 2 on here. So I'm wondering why you're only showing 2, but I count 4 more.
Mr. Chairman, Senator James.
District managers who are also law enforcement. We have a total of 5 district managers now.
Okay.
There were 6, you're correct.
Okay.
And 1 retired. And when that 1 retired, we consolidated and went to 5 districts.
Gotcha.
As a cost savings measure.
Gotcha. So, okay, understood. Got it.
Further questions, committee? Representative Freeman.
Representative Freeman, sorry, my mic was off.
And I'm having trouble unmuting. I've been on this committee a long time, and when they did the outdoor task force to figure out how that we can get more income in to the state by promoting outdoor recreation, one of the common themes was for the state parks is that they do a lot with very little compared to other states. And I don't think that we should lose that. The other thing that is that a lot of these parks are not set to become self-sufficient. I understand that. And I think that I think there should be an effort to find way to combine duties to where that you can have some reduction in force, but I'm not in a position to where you can go from there. When we set the, gave the state parks the ability to set their own fees, we were very clear that we didn't expect there to be very many park fee increases. And I think that I believe that the state parks took that to heart. And I think that that's one of the reasons why there is so much gap between where they could, or where they're at and what they could charge. And I think that what I would like to see is that you have that regional comparison of park fees. I think that will show a justification to raise it, especially if our parks are being filled by out of state people. I like the idea of doing away with the carte blanche camping for the whole season, but again, I think that we're going to have to be to the point where we're willing to take the political heat for that. But the bottom line is we have to preserve our culture, and that's part of what we're doing here. And then the other thing is as the chairman has said, these are different times, and we're going to have the people of Wyoming pay for the services that they enjoy, because minerals can't do it any longer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Freeman, you couldn't put it much better than that. I thought it was very good. very close in total agreement with you on where you're at. You know, the only place I'm at on parks that really need to make money is water parks. And, when I went in my first year, Director Millward Simpson and I butted heads for a period of 4 years over whether the mission should be that you actually try to get these where they're close to even. And I made a little bit of a forewarning to him of what's happening right now. And now we're playing a little bit of catch up. So, you know, for me, what I'm really doing is fishing hard with all the parks people to find areas that they can find their own cuts internally. I'm not asking to do any of that, but some of these hard lift cuts cause extreme abuse to agencies. And I, as a legislator, think it's my place to take some of that abuse. That's what we're hired for, is to do some of the hard decisions. So we can get a list of things out of the parks that there's their priority areas, and then we'll do some of the lifting behind it. And that's the same as what we've done here in Hot Springs. Is part of the problem we ran into with concessionaires here is, how do you live with somebody and then turn around and have to really push on them? And, you know, it leads to really tough, hard places to do things. And, you know, for me, it's time that we reset some of this and get it back. And that's kind of an entry into the next level. We're almost through this. We'll start back into RFPs unless people have got more questions on general. Nick, please.
Just a follow-up, a couple answers to questions from earlier. The visitation to date since we opened Quebec 1 is 2,504 people. It's not quite a year. And again, as Director Westby said, the COVID situation just killed our visitation there. And Senator James, the cost for us to run the dump station at the territorial prison is about $1,300 a year, and we made $2,500 in donations last year.
Could you, I guess, before I do shift off, give me a little bit on territorial prison, whether you think it could go, because I happen to know, I just happen to have on my campground the first manager of the territorial prison, Tim Rubald, and we visited at length about it. And, you know, that's been a tough deal. It was a local one and got handed off to you. And I know you guys have made every attempt in the world to, it lays in a location that on paper it looks like people ought to come to it. Thoughts long term on it, on what to do and how it goes, and what level it ought to be at.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll certainly defer to Director Westby on that to begin with.
Yeah, I'll try. You know, we love the territorial prison. It's an amazing facility. It's an amazing piece of history for the state of Wyoming. It's only territorial prison that we have. It's definitely a facility that is worth saving, and a facility to ensure that is around for the next 100 years or more for future generations. Whether or not it's a state historic site or not, if not us, who? I think you mentioned it, Mr. Chairman, that it was private and they couldn't make it work. However, you know, again, if not us, who? I think it's been proven that it can't, private can't do it. And I get the fact that it shouldn't all fall on the burden of the government to do this. But again, do we want it to fall by the wayside? I think to go back to some of your comments, and Representative Freeman, I appreciate your words as well. And we are on a continuous basis every time we have, let's just say quarterly, we all get together to make sure that things are operating the way they need to be. And do we need to start relocating people? Do we need to consolidate duties? Do we need to, anytime there's a vacant position, we have those conversations of, can we, do we need to move that position? Do we need to hire it? Can we eliminate it? And that's, I think, our new norm internally as a state agency. I think everybody's doing that right now. And I know with our proposal, it's impressive of what's going to end up happening. And yes, we're going to see some programs get significantly cut. And yes, you as legislator and your constituency are going to feel some of that. However, like the bill that we have proposed and the offer that we're giving up some of our general fund and using some of our capital construction to keep the lights on and operate, so your constituents and our visitors all realize and get to have the experiences that they want and need in our system, I think shows the testament of our team willingness to make the hard decision to eliminate capital construction, not eliminate, decrease capital construction to ensure that we get a showcase and be a major part of the tourism industry in the state of Wyoming. Mr. Chairman, I'm not dancing around your question about territorial prison, but again, I got to go back to the economic impact and our mission to be impactful to those local communities, albeit it costs us just looking at $350,000 to operate territorial prison, but the direct visitor spending is almost 70,000, and the impacts to payroll in that area are almost $900,000. So I mean, if we were to shutter a territorial prison, and there would still be a cost because we could not walk away from that building or that facility without maintaining some level of heat, some level of service there to ensure that it doesn't get the way it was when we had to restore that facility. I don't know if you guys have seen that facility back before it got restored, but it was in shambles. And that's what happens when you just leave a building. And what a shame to lose that piece of history because of neglect. And so the beauty part of my agency, and I'll call it my agency because I can beat my chest a little bit, it's our agency. We have a lot of pride, and there's an abundance of passion in the employees that come to work for our agency because of what we get to do on a daily basis. The historic sites are no different. I mean, those people have passion for history. They have passion for the facilities, and they go above and beyond to ensure that our facilities are top notch and presentable to the public, and something that the state of Wyoming can be proud of as they leave our state. They can go, wow, that's amazing history that the state of Wyoming is preserving. No different than the Capitol building that you have across the street from me right now. We spent a lot of money, and I think it was probably 30 years too late. But it's impressive of what you did, and that building will stand there for a lot longer because of what you did. And it's a piece of history that needed to be preserved, and us on a very much smaller scale, obviously, but that's the same passion and abilities that we have.
Thank you. That was exactly what I was looking for an answer. You know, the committee needs justification so that when these arguments come up, that we understand what the values are and what they are. And I'm not saying you cut things to cut them. That's Representative Freeman did a very nice statement on that. Particularly historic sites never are going to be able to generate enough revenue to do themselves. But we also have to justify why we're saving them and what we're doing with them. And so I think that's important. Nick, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to refer to the green sheet. The territorial prison is actually also one of our more successful historic sites. It's by far the most successful revenue generating historic site that we have. Brings in approximately 3 times the next closest historic site, and in fact also brings in more revenue than a couple of our smaller parks. So
which one's that again? I'm sorry.
The territorial prison.
Very good. Any further questions, committee? I had one last one. I'm sure you won't have it. Number of camper nights out of your 1,900 sites. Do you know those offhand?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have that offhand, but we can get.
Yeah, I figured that. That's an important number. That's being in the campground business. You can throw in a $5 multiplier and you can start seeing what it does for your bottom line. And I'd like to see that down the road as we go. So if that's that, we're kind of done with looking at the green sheet. We're going to go back. We've got one piece of unfinished business that my co-chair never pointed out to me. We have a bill to work that's here. And I think if we go to special session, it's important that we bring. I'm going to ask if we have a motion to bring it out. It should be in your package if you have one. And we'll go ahead and work this fee bill up or down before we move on to the concessions.
Mr. Chairman?
I let it
moved.
go. I depend on my co-chair to make me do the right thing. He didn't do it.
Well, we did discuss it earlier.
We discussed it, but we didn't move it and bring it on. And I think with what the testimony we had, that we need to go ahead and move that bill and talk about what we want to do with it.
Representative Flinton and Freeman moved.
Moved. Do we have a second? Okay. Bill's been moved and seconded. We've already talked about the bill. We could work it page by page, but it's only a 2-page bill. So do we have any discussion on the bill? Or does anybody want to go back into it? Do you remember it from this morning?
Mr. Chairman?
I think we covered it pretty well. We're just taking it from what, 30% to 60%.
And moving the effective date, we need an amendment motion to move the effective
I'll make
date.
an amendment to move the effective date to immediately upon
Passage of the bill.
passage of the bill.
Is there a second for it?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I've got a couple of,
Representative Edwards.
got an amendment to make on there. I'd like to move the 60% to 40% and eliminate administrative on line 14 of page 2.
Okay, so,
I'll second that.
okay, it's been moved and seconded. So on line 10, strike 60%, move it to 40%. On line 12, strike administrative. It's been moved and seconded. Discussion, Representative Edwards.
The 40% in there, I think would be good for giving people more places to park. And I think as far as administrative, it ought to be up to us to decide as a legislative body to add them.
Senator Driscoll, we can't hear anyone right now.
I could hear me in the background because I'm next to you. Okay. The 40%, I would like to make that so that it would be an increase so that when they want to change parking spots or trails to repair them, I think is a good thing for the people to be able to use them. And the administrative, I'd like to eliminate that so that that would have to come before the legislative body, so we wouldn't be growing government.
Done.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When this bill first came to us at the last meeting, I was in the same area as what the proposed amendment was. But with further discussion, I finally changed my mind to the 60%. I think that there's two key phrases that you should look at. One says not more than 30% or not more than 60%. Okay, so that doesn't mean you're going to go automatically to 60%. And if we've seen where we're at right now, we've put those limits on what the fee increases have been. And what's happened in his parks has not gone up against the limits. So I trust that they're not going to zoom right back up to the 60%. And on the other part of what Senator or Representative Edwards said is that you want legislative approval. If you go down on line 11 and 12, account in any fiscal year may also be expended with legislative approval. So any changes that's going to happen has to be approved by the legislature. So I think that we have some safeguards in there to make sure that there isn't going to be a growth in government. And as I said before, what's happened is the state parks department is already kind of strapped at where it's at. So you're not going to grow very much. So I would resist the amendment and encourage you to do the same.
Further comments, Representative Tass.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm really in favor of removing the administrative language there for the simple reason that the state is overloaded with state employees, not necessarily here. I think we need to cut state employees across the board, and I think this allows them to continue to do so, to increase if they want to, without our legislative involvement. So I really would like to see the administrative word language removed.
So Representative Tass, would you like to divide the amendment?
Yes, I would, if that's possible.
Okay, so it is divisible. And so the first division would be line 10 on 40%. And the second division is administrative. So as we get ready to vote on this, it'll be the thing I believe you've already made your talk on what you would you like a little further on that end? Are you ready to go to a vote?
Yes,
okay. Further comments? Further comments? Question you can call. So we're voting on Division 1, which is line 10, moving 60% to 40%. All in favor of Division 1, which will move to 60 to 40, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. I believe that is it. All opposed, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I believe so. That amendment has failed. We're back on Amendment 2 or Division 2,
Mr.
which
Chairman.
is line 12, striking administrative. Question being called. All in favor? If you vote aye, you are striking administrative out of the bill. All in favor, raise your hand, please. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is hard on the screen and off. 4. All in favor of, or all opposed to striking? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That has failed as well. Director Westby, you can't vote. We're back on the bill. All in favor of the bill, raise your hand.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Speaking. Oh, we do. I'm sorry, I can't. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, this is John Brody with LSO.
Yeah.
2 points I wanted to just raise. The first being, in speaking with Mary Beth, I believe, was there a motion made to amend the effective date of the bill?
There was.
Was that voted upon?
Was not. Thank you. Good catch.
So there's an outstanding motion. And I also wanted to remind the committee that as part of the adoption of the interim rules last year, you have opted to require a majority of each house in order to adopt any final action. That rule did not affect the 2 votes that the committee just conducted, but
it will.
It could be relevant for not only this motion, but for the ultimate on whether the committee adopts this bill as a committee bill. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So we're back to Representative Co-Chairman Miller's motion to move the effective date to effective upon signing. Moved and seconded. All in favor of moving the effective date, raise your hand, please. That's unanimous stuff. We don't have to even go there. We don't have to have a count. So that's done. We are now back on the bill. Question being called. All in favor of 21 LSO-0031 draft 0.5? Raise your hand. We're gonna have to hold them for a bit so that John can get House and Senate both ways.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Senate 1, Driscoll.
It's got a
Mr. Chairman, isn't this a roll call vote?
roll call vote.
Mr. Chairman, this is a
Roll
roll call vote.
Sorry. Yep. I'm shut off. All right. That'll make things.
So, Mr. Chairman, this is on Bill 21 LSO 31 as amended. Senator Anselmi Dalton,
Aye.
Senator James, Senator James,
No.
Senator Moniz,
Aye.
Senator Wasserberger,
Aye.
Representative Edwards,
No.
Representative Flintner,
Aye.
Representative Freeman,
Aye.
Representative Haley,
Aye.
Representative Newsom,
Aye.
Representative Tass,
No.
Representative Winter,
No.
Representative Yin,
Aye.
Co-Chairman Driscoll,
Aye.
Co-Chairman Miller.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, with 4 aye votes on the Senate side and 6 aye votes on the House side, the bill has been adopted.
Very good, committee. That bill will come up during general session unless we have a special session. And I would ask this committee, if we get a special session, this could be non-COVID. You want us to go to management council to ask it to be added in. And I'm going to take that latitude to ask the committee because
I think it depends on how long the special session is and whether they want to open it up to non-COVID.
okay.
If it's not open up to non-COVID, we shouldn't bring it.
Well, the non-COVID, the way they'll do it, I believe, and I've worked on it already, is they will bring some non-COVID bills if management council approves, and they'll meet.
Okay.
So I'll take the latitude with co-chairman Miller to decide whether that comes in front or not. We'll visit with Director Westby as well to see what the importance is. With that, we're, go ahead.
Chairman, one answer to a previous question for you. Non-resident camping nights? Non-resident camping nights, 8,254. Resident camping nights, 13,156.
Very good. That's quick and fast. Thank you.
We have a great team in Cheyenne helping us out.
That gives us some good answers on those annual passes a little bit, and also on what we could do if we, particularly like in Glendo, that's a captive market. If we bounce those fees by 25 or 30% or 40% on the non-residents, make it where we're at the ultimate maximum on that both ways. Co-Chairman Miller.
Just a question on the resident annual permit. Does that count as one or does that count as 10 or 20 days or actual days used?
Mr. Co-Chair, that's a great question. I think I don't know the answer to the question. Hopefully the person listening who gave me that information will tell me.
Since non-resident fees are a little bit higher, sounds like the revenue is approximately 50-50 between the two?
That's probably a fair estimate, Mr. Co-Chair.
It just occurs to me, Glendo is such a massive beast. When you start talking 20,000 people a weekend,
You need to charge more.
We're probably overusing the facility. There's only a couple ways. You can either lottery the campground sites, or you say, folks, 4th of July, if you want to be at Glendo and you're a non-resident, it's going to cost $75 a site. or X amount. And I'm all for that. I'm gonna be honest with you. Part of parks is an experience. When you show up and there's tents stacked on top of tents and vehicles on top of you go home and you tend to be cranky.
Mr. Co-Chair, it's per night. It is the actual nights, not
Okay.
not one night per pass.
Yeah, very good. Well, we are done with that area then, unless there's another question. And that moves us on, basically, we're on the RFP now, visiting about it, which the horse is out of the barn, folks. Basically, we know it's coming. There's gonna be another one show up. But I would like this committee, and you can shut me down if you don't want to talk about it, folks, because we're middle of the afternoon. What do we do if these don't go through? And how do we look at RFPs in the future? Because I'm telling you, when I'm looking at this package you sent out to me, I'm just the same as I've been before. Is I don't think there's any way possible to get a good outcome. And I shouldn't taint it that way. We've got people in the crowd that are relying on it and vice versa. But I just don't see a way in 60 days that anybody gets that thing filled out and you get anybody that's legitimate that bids on it, other than you're holding the weapon to the head of the folks that already have them, and that's hard for me. Co-Chairman Miller.
Just curious, what do the contracts look like for the TP and for Best Western right now? Are they this thick, similar?
Mr. Co-Chair, very similar.
Okay. Thank you.
Do we have comments on them, or are we? Because I don't have a lot. I don't know where you go other than, I guess you've heard me say 18 times. I don't appreciate it. Mr. Metzger, would you like to say something? I just see you move your hand, and we're somewhat informal here. So anyone, Mr. Co-Chairman?
Well, I think I heard from, I don't know, maybe it was their lawyer. Did I hear that they would accept the terms of what Best Western and TP has done already? No, I didn't hear that.
I don't. So let's try not to be really redundant. But I'm gonna give you guys phenomenal attitude. That's not normal. That includes anyone in the crowd. Is raise your hand, jump up and down. If there's people online, I really think it's important. So we're talking potentially down the road of privatizing other facilities in the state. I think this sets part of the trend for it, and it's really important that we get it right. So that being said, I'm gonna let you go, and then we'll go with others. I will slow you down a little bit if it looks like you're going on. So it's not me being rude. It's just that I'm late and I'm cranky.
And the coffee is off. Mr. Chairman and members of the Legislative Committee, I want to just make 2 points. One point is that you talked about law enforcement, and for those of you who don't know, we're sitting a great part of the state park. The improvement part of the state park is within the limits of the town of Thermopolis, which provides law enforcement there, and recently entered into a memorandum of understanding to provide law enforcement up in the buffalo pasture at no cost to the state. There were mutual benefits for that memorandum of understanding, but for this particular park, it's not costing the state anything. Second point, I would just like the committee to consider that these management agreements, if the committee would put some recommendation or pressure to extend those to at least June 30th, 2021. And I only say that because I don't know if any of this is coming up again in your interim legislative sessions. If it correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought most of the interim legislative sessions were to deal with the COVID-19 monies and the federal money and all of that. Am I correct, or are what we're talking about today coming up in a legislative session before next January, February.
Mr. Co-Chairman, I'll address a little bit on that, and then we'll allow Nick and Darren or more if necessary. I think that the horse is out of the barn on the RFP. It's going to happen. It's coming out, and that part of it's going to occur. Whether people bid on it or not, I'm not sure. But I'm not sure where we're at legislatively. We even have anything to do with it at this point. I'll be honest with you. That's in the purview of the executive branch, and it's up to them whether it happens or not. As far as extending to June of 2021, my recommendation would be, and I will allow extensive thoughts from Nick, Darren, yourself, and the concessionaires. My off-the-hip recommendation would be to enter into a 5-year agreement that's very similar. We're not going to go broke for 5 years and take the time and get it right. And that sounds like an awful long time, but after the amount of years we've done, the law says 5 years. That's the minimum they can go into. And that would be my personal thoughts, would be to step in and say a very simple 5-year agreement that has some very solid terms at the end of it that says, if this series of thing hasn't happened, then this happens. So I'm going to leave it at that, let you comment on it, and then we're going to let the parks people in the committee go on, because all you've heard is my opinion, and that's for everybody's edification. That's mine only. It's not the committee position.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Where I'm coming from is that from the comments, not only today, but prior comments in prior meetings, it's my view as a businessman that the RFP is an unworkable thing. I think if the state would look at what's happened recently in the last, since they put that out, I think they're going to find, and I think if they were honest about it, would admit it's unworkable for them. They may have some long-range plans that we don't know about. And maybe this is the birth of the baby of the RFP. But it appears, given that nobody else has expressed any interest in bidding on this stuff, that nobody probably will bid on this. And it'll be back to the drawing board between the concessionaires and the state. You know, one of the problems with the RFP is when you submit the RFP, you sign a bunch of appendix documents as well, which basically lock you into I don't recall the term, whether it's a management type thing for the extent of the term or whether it's a lease itself, but you're already locked in. There's no negotiating that'll be done. The reason I suggested moving the date is the legislature created it, and while it's being executed by the executive branch, the legislature can also amend or destroy it and come up with a more workable solution. At least that's my opinion of the power of the legislature. And so that, you know, quite frankly, more thought needs to go into that process. And of course, the concessionaires had no input into it whatsoever. And the experts say it's pretty bad. And you've heard from Bud Petrillo from the Days Inn, it scared off any potential buyers when his broker had potential buyers to take over. Of course, it's a problem. The buyers, it's a two-edged sword, because you enter into a sale contract here with a contingency provision that it will not be effective until there is a lease over here on the with the state. And with the lease with the state is contingent upon closing with the buyer and seller. So it's It's a next to impossible business situation, which when somebody mentioned earlier that we want to, you're basically forcing the concessionaires out of business. There was quite a bit of truth to that comment. So I was just trying to find a way for the legislature to take a look at this. There may be some in the legislature that think this got out of hand, that it was beyond the intent of just making these agreements with the concessionaires in a quid pro quo manner of negotiating a fair and reasonable contract for a period of time for an acceptable sum of money with the usual provisions of you'll do it right or, you're out. But so I've said that. That's all I had to say about that.
Mr. Messenger, without saying a lot more, you can expect another bill, but I'm not going to get in the way of the RFP that's out. We'll see what the process works. I can tell you from my standpoint, that's part of why this meeting's gone on this afternoon is I want the committee to be informed and understand well enough what's happening here. So that should there not be an RFP and that is accepted, that I personally will be looking at, it'll be a committee bill if I can get it as one because it's got an easier chance. If not, I'll be bringing a personal bill that creates a framework. And I can't tell you how difficult that is to create a perception of fairness between your side and the branch. I represent the government and that's the way it is. And so it's probably going to look somewhat one-sided to you anyway I do it. But I think you understand at this point, my intent's never been to do damage to existing concessionaires or to force them out of business. That was not my intent of my bill. It's not been my intent. I've made multiple attempts to come back inside this community so everybody could understand what we're doing. And I can tell you, I'm very open to, as Mr. Petrello can tell you, I think at this point is sitting down, as does Nick and Darren. My goal is not to destroy something that's here. My pledge is this. Whatever agreements come out in the future after this RFP, whether or not, they'll be very enforceable both directions. Both parties will have their feet held to the fire, and the agreement will be simple enough that it actually is enforceable. That's my pledge to you.
And I understand your position. I appreciate it very much. And we've met before and I've heard that. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and committee members.
Committee members, any questions for Mr. Messenger before he goes? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions out of the committee or? Come on up, Nick. Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Edwards or Representative Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we had testimony earlier about one of the concessionaires not having to give up everything that was there, I don't think it's fair to the other three that these are not the same. And I think those that haven't signed one ought at least ways have the opportunity that one did. And I think the one that given up everything, he ought to have the opportunity to change that. And that's all I've got to say on that.
I'll give a little background there in Parks May. The background, as I understand it, all four concessionaires were offered the same contract at a very similar time, and two of them turned it down and two took it. My recollection at that time was the other two didn't think it was workable the same as now, and they turned it down. And now we're in a different area, and I am one of the ones. This is like children. All four don't have to have carbon copies of the same agreement. Business agreements are tapered between them, and different agreements at different times look much different. And we're in a different time now. The new agreements may look better or worse to someone else that come out. And I would say some of that would be on both ends. We've learned some from them, and we'll learn some more. Mr. Co-Chair.
Yeah, I think what Representative Edwards, thank you, Mr. Chairman. What Representative Edwards was referring to is I believe the TP has a contract that returns the facility to the state, and the Best Western doesn't. So I think, yeah, exactly. The one returns it and one doesn't. And he's making the point that, you know, to be fair to the TP, whatever we do with all of them, we need to offer them. Like if we don't ever take them back, maybe the TP needs a chance to renegotiate. You know, I think that was the point.
That's and I'm open to talking, but I don't feel that way at all. Is, you know, they signed a contract at a point in time knowing full well what the contract was. You know, if they follow it or don't follow it, it'll go away. If not, what's probably going to happen is their agreements are going to expire while these guys have another 20 years on there. And so you've got this process, and that was ours 11 years ago in this committee. This committee actually voted to ask the administrative branch not to renew any of them and to renew them all at the same time. And the governor's office chose not to do so. It was Carrie Jo Gray came and informed us that they'd signed an agreement with the TV after we voted to not do it. So, Ms. Nayland, would you like to follow on?
Mr. Chairman, one point of clarification. We have had some interest from other parties about bidding on these concessions, including someone who requested information this morning. So it's not that it's not the case that there is no other interest. Whether we receive any RFP, any proposals is a different story, but there's definitely been other interest.
And I stand by what I said. I refuse to do anything to get in the way of, we're at the 11th hour again. I'm not going to throw sand in the gears. We'll take the chance, see where it goes. If nothing comes. I think both you and Director Westby have been aware that I was going to come with something should nothing happen. And, I also, for the other guys, if they don't like the deal they made, one thing that always works with any contract, they're welcome to hire a lawyer and bring a proposal back to Parks to change their agreement. There's no law that says you can't renegotiate an agreement halfway down the path or choose to turn one back. I suspicion, and that's, I was hoping that the TP would come, and I'm not going to say a whole lot more, but I suspicion at some point there's going to be enforcement action on that contract with the TP. And I'm going to give forewarning of it today is I stand behind my word. What I told you is these agreements stand to both parties. And if they're not following them, it's my duty as a legislator to make sure that your branch does what's put on paper to happen. And I intend to follow that. So that's kind of a shot over the bow for everybody that if you signed a piece of paper that says you're going to follow the rules, you're going to follow the rules. That's how we got in the first mess. So that's where I'm at. I don't speak for the committee. I speak for myself, but both you and Director Westby know that I'm not going to quit on it until this deal gets cleaned up. Comments, committee? Anyone in the audience like to make any further comments? Come on up. Roland. And we've got time. And this is really what this is for all of us to understand what's going. So please.
Yes. Hi.
Introduce yourself again.
I'm Roland Lawn. I'm owner of Star Plunge. And I'm just asking you guys to give us a fair lease.
What?
We'd like to have a fair lease. The RFP, I know we're going over some stuff. If you read that thing, it's just a monster. We give away everything we put in if we happen to win with no compensation. And it's very unfair because if we accept this, after we do everything the state says, why would we want to put another dime in to our facility? We won't do it, or whoever gets it, they won't put money back in. Right now, as an owner, we put lots of money back in. We like to improve our facility. We've grown a long ways since 1975, and we want to continue. So we're just asking for a fair lease. We want to pay a fair rate, whatever they ask, and we do the best we can to keep our facility the safest, cleanest as possible. I hope that when you guys come over this afternoon, you'll see that we do put money back in, and some of the elements that we face prevents us from looking like Bally's or some fancy place, but like I said, people like what we have. That's why they return to the Star Plunge. It's not the same as any other place on earth. You know, it's a very special place. It's been there for over 150 years. It's been in my family for 45. So, going on 46 in August, 46 years.
Native Americans would argue with you, it's been there a bit more than that.
Oh, well, yeah, it was there. It was, I mean, but Star Plunge, it was placed where it is right now for a certain reason. It started off as a 20 foot by 20 foot, 4 foot deep little hole in the ground. And it was placed a certain distance from the big spring so that the water would flow from the big spring down a long channel, allowing the water to aerate and cool down. So the water could continuously flow through this small pool. And that was like, I think that was back in the mid 1800s. I keep looking for more information, but that's the best I've got, you know, just from pictures and what people have told me in the last 45 years. But like I said, we're $100,000 into this RFP, and I don't know what kind of adjustments are going to have to be made to continue, but it's going to cost a lot more. I mean, it's a monster, and this was created by a lady. Her name's Margaret. She's from Boston, and she does all the RFPs for Yellowstone and, you know, these big national parks, and this document you have, this RFP is almost the same as Yellowstone. It's a monster, and there's no way I could do it alone. That's why you have to hire all those people.
Questions for Ms. Leonard? Any questions? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys. Hopefully you'll come over afterwards, right?
I don't think we are. We were talking about, we were all there last year, I think. I'm happy to come over myself. I've been swimming since last year, so.
Yeah, I would like to show you what we've done.
When we get done, we'll talk about the committee then. Whoever wants to can. It's just kind of a voluntary tour. So.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'd love to show you, and you know, you'll see that we take pride.
Perfect. Thank you. Any further testimony of any kind? Come on up. I was hoping you'd get to the table at some point.
Eventually. I'm moving my chair over so I can see a little better. I'm Mary Ann Rush. I'm the Executive Director of the Thermopolis Chamber, and thank you guys so much for holding this meeting here. I appreciate the opportunity. I just want some clarification on the RFP process because I have a lot of people who ask me about it. And Roland, I'm going to use you as an example. I hope that's okay. So if I submitted an RFP proposal to operate the Star Plunge and the state accepted it, then I would reimburse Roland or pay him for the appraised value and then have the contract with the state for 20 years. And then you're telling me after that 20 years, the state would have the buildings back according to that agreement? I just want the clarification when I'm asked.
I'm going to refer to Mr. Naylor or to.
Would you like the hot seat?
It's right there. That's fine. Mr. Chairman, that is sort of correct. The term of the agreement is part of the RFP. So it's not necessarily 20 years. It could be longer than that. And the idea is that the new concessionaire is going to build in whatever profit they need to make into the operations to offset the fact that they won't own the business at the end. So if that means whatever that means that they need to do to make their money back, that's part of that agreement.
Okay, so then the percentage that they pay to the state, they would give that percentage less so that the difference they kind of pocket to compensate for what I paid for the Star Plunge. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure I entirely understand the question.
Okay, because let's say I paid the Star Plunge $500,000 and then we have the agreement for the 20 years. Do I space out that 5,000 and not have it as a percentage going to the state so I get my investment back? How would I get that 500,000 back?
Mr. Chairman, the appraised value of the Star Plunge is what you would pay to the current operator.
Correct.
And then How you choose to operate and profit from the business over the term of whatever your lease is up to you.
But at the end, I'm just done. Correct.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Mr. Chairman, this is
No,
Darren.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Generate one for me.
Okay.
Are they allowed to do any changes? Can they do strike in the RFP and have it accepted?
Mr. Chairman, I apologize, I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, I didn't know. So
Can a prospective bidder on the RFP, do you allow strikes in the document? Can they put a strike in there on the return back to the state and have it accepted?
Mr. Chairman, the proposer and the RFP can propose whatever they like to us. The contract document is fairly set. Those parameters are fairly set, and we have very limited ability to navigate within those parameters. But the RFP is a fairly flexible working document. They can propose whatever they like to us.
But they're gonna have to sign the contract before they consummate the deal.
Mr. Chairman, pardon me?
They're still gonna have to sign the contract before they can consummate the deal, though. If they propose, it doesn't do you much good to propose and then be told that we're not gonna sign the agreement.
Mr. Chairman, their contract will reflect what was agreed to in the RFP.
Okay, very good. That helps.
So like if she buys it for 500,000 for 5 years, after 2 years, I mean, she hasn't made all her money back yet, and there's repairs that need to be made on the building. I don't think she'll put the money back in because she needs to save every penny because she's going to be ousted in 2 more years. So the money you put in after a certain time, you're saying, I'm going to put no more money in this project because I won't get it back. You won't, you'll never see the money again. And then you'll have somebody there that'll let it run to the ground. Let it run to the ground because we're not gonna put any pump in. Big slide's gonna stay.
look up here, Mr. Chairman, you're talking.
I'm sorry.
Oh, well, our rules, we just got to, and it's to keep the conversation.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not doing it to be rude to you, but it keeps it where it's a little less personal.
Yeah, I understand that. But you won't get the money back. You won't get somebody to continue to put money in and keep the facility nice. The last few years, I'm gonna buy cars, I don't get that money back. There's no incentive. There might be some management team that comes in and they'll say, hey, cut costs at all management and just let it burn down. And then what that will do, people won't come. Hotels in town, restaurants, everybody will pay. When the COVID thing was going, people were coming in. As soon as we opened the park, we started filling hotel rooms. I've had people from hotels calling me and saying, thank you, Lord. Thanks for reopening when you did. And you probably know too. As soon as the pools opened, things started booming. I think Kevin even said that the park was 95% down for was it June or May or something. Those pools are a key for the town. I mean, that's just my opinion. That the pools do a lot for a community. And like I said before, we charge $12.50 to get in. That sounds like a lot. But when the new guy comes in, he's got to recoup the money he put in, and he's gonna want to increase those rates. So our economy right now, the $12.50 is a lot. If it goes up to 15, 20 bucks to get in, it's gonna be expensive. Less people will come.
Further comments?
No, thank you very much.
Marianne, I appreciate all you folks do.
Yes.
Committee, any further comments or anybody from the audience? Okay, we're done for the day.
There's still one on Freeman.
Oh, Freeman, Representative Freeman, I'm sorry. I've abused you all day. It's been fun.
Well, thank you. I understand all the complexities of this issue. I think I've done 3 tours of Star Plunge, and I've noticed the improvements over the years. And I used to bring my family there. This is one issue that I don't have a feel-good gut feeling about going forward or whatever it is, because it's been a lingering problem for a long time. In Rock Springs, during the boom, it was not uncommon for a landowner to make a deal to where that somebody could come in and build a building to where that they can set up a business. And then after the term of the contract, and I don't know what those were, probably 25, 30 years, that the property or that the building reverted to the landowner. Again, with what the chairman says is whatever you agree on that contract is what you have to follow. I understand the importance of the springs to Thermopolis, and I took to heart the testimony of the owner to where that his family took it over and it needed to be updated and improved, and they made lots of different improvements to where that the people in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s flocked to that area. What I've been told, and I don't know if this is true because I'm not a big hot springs person, is that for state-of-the-art hot springs, you have to provide more. And the question is for this committee and the state is are we going to find a way to update it to where the people go forward? I think that the state has been giving away a resource for a long time. And giving away is probably too strong a term. But I think that the state has to be in a situation, especially in its economics times, to where they have a return, to where that we can keep state parks going forward. I hope that it continues in the Wyoming way, to where that we can make reasonable, rational, favorable agreements. Like I said, I've been involved in this process probably 4 years at least, maybe 5, and I still don't have a gut feeling what the right thing to do is. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very good, as usual. Any further comments from the committee? Any further in the crowd? So we're done, and I'm going to ask for Roland's sake if anybody from the committee is going to go over there so we don't have him sitting over there waiting for an hour for nobody to show up. I think
Mr. Chairman, you're muted.
I'm sorry. My bad. I've had trouble with that all day. So probably the two of us is all rolling. So I'll walk over, and I'm probably not going to go horribly far. I think I toured with you in between once even, and I've been here in the midterm. I come over here with my grandkids 3-4 times a year. So we patronize you. Whether I beat you up or not, I still come see you. So we're done for the day. We'll start again at 8:30 tomorrow. Our topics tomorrow will be, because we got a little being ready, these bills are fairly lengthy. Tomorrow will be Gaming Commission update, which is pretty boilerplate at 8:30. Office Tourism update, same thing. Diane Schober will give us the updates on it. And then the tourism sector relief COVID bill we will do. And then civil and liability issues. And we got 2 bills on that. We'll be done for the day. We probably will try to stick to schedule because I know we've got people on the other. So if we're done earlier, we're probably not going to get done earlier. Fair warning, because I know the lawyers.
A lot of people going to testify tomorrow.
I had asked that they be on the agenda, and we will make
they're on it.
Okay.
1 o'clock. Maybe you heard from them that they weren't going to testify.
No, they are going to testify. They asked me specific, and obviously I've got a copy here in my package that was out because I called LSO and asked that they be allowed to testify. So they'll be here at 1 if that's the case. You've got the current. I'm not online. I brought one from home. So we're done till tomorrow, folks. Thank all of you. We'll all think lots about parks because these are trying times, and I thank all of you parks people for giving all the effort you have.